And all right, hello everyone. We are live. Please let us know in the chat when you can see us and hear us. Again, everyone, we are live, and I would just ask that you just let us know in the chat when you can see us and hear us. Now, I ask this right now at the very beginning because Khalid, I actually had a terrible experience once upon a time. I don't know. Have you gone live a bunch? Do you do a lot of lives?
I do, and my middle name is technical difficulties. There's always something up.
Well, in this time there weren't even any technical difficulties. It was one of my first ever webinars,
Yeah.
and I thought that everything was going really, really well. And then I was like super confident. I was like, okay, I'm killing it. Like I like these slides, I prepared, I'm ready. And I went like 10 minutes in without checking the chat first. And then I checked the chat after 10 minutes, like I had a question, and everyone is saying, you're not sharing your screen. Like we've just been staring at your face the
Oh
whole time.
no.
I know. So now I always ask at the beginning if folks can see and hear. And I'm checking, and it looks like people can. And somebody in the chat says, "Hey, you told this story on another webinar, which you gave." Yes, it was so traumatic that I bring this up when on every webinar, basically.
That does sound bad, unfortunately. It happens to the best of us, though.
So my other request is, folks are already doing this, but could you let us know in the chat where in the world you're joining us from? So we already have people tuning in from New Delhi, Ecuador,
Wow.
Italy, Oregon, Mexico. I think I see someone in here from Iraq. So we've got people here from all over, and I especially appreciate you joining us if it's very, very late at night and like you're staying up late to watch the webinar. It means a lot.
Mhm.
Now I want to turn this over to I want to turn this over, but before I do, I'm just going to quickly share my screen because there is a few important things you need to know before we get started. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. Do, 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 do. All right, so when you're watching the webinar, you're looking at a screen like this. You've got, your chat over on the right, and you've got the video over here on the main screen. Now, if you are saying, hey, these slides, they're a little bit blurry, things are like out of focus, hard to read, just click the gear icon on the bottom right and make sure you've set the quality to the highest one, 720p HD. And if things are a little bit small or a little bit hard to read, just hit the full screen button at the bottom right, and that'll make it full screen. Just do note that you will have to exit the full screen in order to view or ask questions in the chat. Now, speaking about the chat and the questions, Khalid is going to be doing the presentation, and I'll be writing down the questions for him to ask at the end. So write down all your questions during the webinar, and we'll be asking them at the end. But there's one question that I'm going to answer right now. I'm not going to answer it again. Okay, I'm going to answer it right now. Yes, you will get a replay. You will get a replay. You will get it for free. You will get it to your email address automatically. You have to do nothing to receive it. It will go to you automatically. Now, I just need your help now because some folks will join late and they'll be like, hey, I joined late. Will there be a replay? Just let them know, yeah, Cam from Teachable told us there was going to be a replay. So thanks for helping me out in the chat. So now for me here in Salt Lake City, Utah, it's 12:03 p.m. So Khalid, I'm going to turn this over to you. I can't wait to hear these inside secrets about Facebook ads.
Awesome. Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, Cameron, thank you for the introduction, and everybody joining, thank you so much. It's pretty cool how many countries are being represented. I'm in Canada, so I saw a couple other people mentioning they were also in Canada. Welcome, fellow Canadians. Everyone else, thank you for making the time. I'm going to make this as valuable, as actionable as possible. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay.
Screen's looking good.
Oh, thank you. You never know. So, hi everyone. Today's training is really going to be covering 7 pro tactics for more profitable Facebook and Instagram campaigns based off of my own experience working with Facebook ads, but also I worked at Facebook and Facebook headquarters for several years. And really the goal today is for you to walk away with not just conceptual insights and conceptual best practices, but actionable steps you can immediately take after this session for more effective and more profitable Facebook ad campaigns. But if you haven't worked substantially with Facebook ads Instagram ads before, or maybe you're just getting into it, I think a very valid question to have is, why should I care? Why should you care so much about Facebook ads? And specifically because it is a complicated platform and it's only getting more complex over every single day. It's an investment in your time and your effort to learn about Facebook and Instagram ads. So I want to cover off First off, why is it that you can no longer ignore the power of Facebook and Instagram ads? Why is it that it's a valuable investment in your time and your effort? Well, number one is unmatched reach. So 2.5 billion people are using Facebook's ad ecosystem every day, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, which still has not been monetized, by the way. But that reach is really unparalleled versus any other traditional advertising medium ever. And the second reason is the machine learning and automation that operates the ad ecosystem. So, it's really easy to just throw around buzzwords like AI, automation, machine learning, but today we're actually going to specifically look at how that plays a really important role in the way that ads get delivered, the way they get made, the ways they get optimized. And my philosophy here really is that as advertisers, the best thing we can do is find out how to properly instruct Facebook's AI, Facebook's automation, so that we do less work and that the machine learning does more work. And every day, engineers at Facebook are improving the effectiveness of the machine learning, the automation that drives the ad auction. So it's only going to get more powerful with time. Now, the third reason is universal value for businesses. There's a reason that 8 million advertisers are consistently coming back and using Facebook and Instagram ads. Very few of those are large businesses. Many of them are small, medium advertisers, entrepreneurs, brick and mortar shop owners. The list goes on, but there's a reason. It's because of the universal value potential that you can find on Facebook and Instagram ads. You just need to understand how to make it work for you. So I want to share this 10-year roadmap that Mark Zuckerberg presented. Actually, he presented this 4 years ago. So it's a purposely dated chart. But I think it gives us some insight into this trajectory Facebook's going, and by virtue of that, the trajectory of the ad ecosystem. So 4 years ago, Mark said, here's what we're going to be focused on in 3 years, and then in 5 years, and then in 10 years. Now, in 3 years, sure enough, Facebook's focus has been the Facebook Blue app. And now we're coming up on 5 years. And, sure enough, video, Messenger, search, WhatsApp, groups, Instagram, we can all say that, yes, these are now integral parts of the Facebook ecosystem. But I think where it gets really interesting is when we look at the 10-year roadmap. So this is now 5 years away, not that far anymore. And the focus areas were, number one, connectivity. So connectivity for Facebook is really about bringing people online, providing access, internet access to people who might not have existing internet infrastructure or sufficient broadband connections. And so, Facebook's been running for years experiments. How do we use drones, satellites, or lasers to beam down internet to the most remote places? And as a result, tens of millions of people will come online. And what happens naturally when people come online? Well, they start using social media. They start using Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger. And so understanding this, I think it emphasizes the importance of understanding and the optimal way to use Facebook ads now, so that when the entire world is online, this is more potential reach for us to use to deliver our business messages. Now, the second one is AI, artificial intelligence. And this does, in fact, play a role every single day in the way ads get delivered. The algorithm that determines who's going to see your ad when you run a campaign, the algorithm that is behind the way ads get optimized. Pretty soon, you're just going to give Facebook a bunch of videos, a bunch of images, a bunch of copy, a bunch of headlines, and it's going to find the right combination based on AI for each individual person who's about to see your ad. So AI is just going to improve with time, and that means Facebook's potential as an ad platform is going to get even more powerful. And the last is virtual reality, artificial reality. Facebook owns Oculus, and it's fun, it's cool, I have one, but the reality is that VR and AR are sort of reaching this tipping point with respect to consumer adoption. And very soon, millions of people are going to be online on those platforms, and then Facebook's going to monetize them, which means there's going to be potential for ads. So very exciting next few years. And, you know, people sometimes ask me, they'll send me a headline about Facebook in the news and they'll say, you know, is it worth learning about Facebook ads still with these negative headlines? And for me, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, Facebook ads are just going to get more powerful. The potential is going to get greater, and it's never been a better time to invest in learning how to use it profitably. So I haven't really talked about myself yet, so I'm going to back up a bit and give you some background just for context on where my perspective is coming from. So my name's Khalid Hamadeh. I've been working with Facebook ads for about 7 years. Basically, I started agency side. So I lived and worked in Dubai for a year on Coca-Cola buying Facebook ads. And then I moved to Toronto, Canada, and I was buying Facebook ads for Procter & Gamble. And then eventually Facebook hired me, the Facebook Canada office. I was the youngest person at the time, unnecessary brag, but nonetheless I was. And I was working with consumer packaged goods companies. So these are traditional advertisers like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Johnson & Johnson, Nestle, and they do spend a lot, but you know, at times they're traditional advertisers, and so there's a legacy associated with that. But the next thing I did was pretty cool, because then I transferred to Facebook headquarters and I was put on this digital natives team. So the clients I started working with were fundamentally digital, the likes of Netflix, Amazon, eBay, Microsoft. And I found that working with digital native companies, the way that they adapt, they pivot, the way they are constantly experimenting, you learn a lot more about how Facebook ads can be potentially used. So here's my socials. Feel free to follow me if you like. But, you know, I'll tell you a bit about what happened after I left Facebook, but over the past 7 years, I've really ended up consulting for companies of every single size and helping them achieve all the same thing, which is how do we return a positive return on investment through Facebook and Instagram ads, right? There's a universal sort of objective that we've always been trying to meet, whether it was enterprise clients on the left here, like Netflix and Procter & Gamble, these guys spending over $1 million a day sometimes on ads, or if it's a nonprofit or a small or medium business or an entrepreneur or freelancer like the ones on the right here. Morning Brew, funny enough, just got acquired by Business Insider last week. So a little feather in the old hat there. And so you see when working with companies of every size that there are certain universal principles that apply when it comes to Facebook and Instagram ads. And that's what we're going to be focused on today. So after I left Facebook, I was traveling a bunch and trying my hand at starting my own companies. I launched a bunch of several e-commerce businesses, some of which were successful, but you know, some of which were utter failures. But I think it's important to recognize the failures because you do learn a lot about that as well. You learn a lot from failure. And I think it's about pivoting as fast as you can and using your learnings to adjust your future business model. So now I run an e-commerce company, Straw Save. We provide sustainable straws to businesses. I have a Facebook ads consultancy and I run a Facebook ads course. And, you know, I often hear the same thing when I start working with a new client or a new agency or a business owner or someone who's not sure about Facebook ads. What they often say is, you know, we have a very nuanced business. We have specific business objectives, specific business challenges, and I'm not sure that Facebook ads is right for me. I think our needs are too specific. And there's truth to, as Dave Chappelle famously said, modern problems require modern solutions. So what I want to do quickly is give you a few examples of nuanced business objectives that I've worked with when it comes to some clients. And I want to demonstrate how it doesn't matter what your business objective is, as long as you understand how to leverage Facebook's ad auction, you can find a way to deliver on those objectives. So the first one, I was working with Big Life Foundation, a nonprofit that focuses on wildlife protection. And we use Facebook ads to drive people to their donation page so that they could fundraise. And every dollar we put into ads generated $4 revenue, which is 4x ROI, and largely profitable. Another one is Mad Radish. This is a brick and mortar salad chain. They're fundamentally in person, but we use local awareness ads to bring in actual foot traffic into their salad store. YWCA, another nonprofit with specific needs. In this case, they were running a fundraising event in person while we used event response ads to drive people to that event where they fundraised for the next year. And this last client, client is very demanding, sometimes very challenging. This one's my mom. My mom's an artist. And as an artist, we use Facebook ads to put her artwork in front of the people who run galleries, gallery curators. And this is how we get some international exposure and exhibitions. So, these are 4 specific examples of businesses that maybe didn't think Facebook ads could work for them, but we found a way to do it and to do it profitably. Okay. So I find it's more helpful, rather than looking at the biggest advertisers on Facebook, I find it's more helpful to look at what digital native advertisers are doing. And they're rarely the biggest, but they're usually the fastest growing. So as I said earlier, a digital native company, fundamentally digital in how they market. So if you look at Article, they sell furniture. Allbirds sells shoes. Casper, mattresses. Masterclass, courses. Bombas, socks. Harry's, razors. These aren't fundamentally digital products, but their approach to running a business is fundamentally digital. And so they pivot very quickly. They're constantly measuring. They build killer ads because they understand that they should build those ads mobile first and suited to the way people consume content on mobile. And these guys know a lot. So in terms of getting inspired, in terms of which competition you should look at, definitely look at digital native companies. There's a lot we can learn from them. And in fact, there's a lot that the biggest advertisers could learn from these guys as well. What do they have in common is a good question to ask. And I find it really falls into 3 buckets. The most successful digital native companies, number 1, have a profound understanding of Facebook's ad auction and how to make it work for them. And I'm going to go into this in a bit. We're actually going to cover, if we look under the hood, how does Facebook's ad auction actually work? Number 2, perpetual testing. So digital native advertisers, they're not running 1 test a month and that's it. There's literally constantly tests happening, whether it's split tests, conversion lift studies, brand lift studies, A/B tests. It's the mindset of constantly iterating, constantly learning, and then scaling what you've learned. And then the third thing is they understand the old adage that creative is king. You can't power through a campaign with so-so creative. Creative is literally make or break. And so we're going to cover today some of the ways you can build ads affordably, quickly, effectively, and without much time or effort. So let's jump into how the ad auction works. And it is somewhat technical, but we're going to simplify it. And I strongly encourage you guys to try your best to understand this because everything stems from this foundational knowledge. Once you understand how the ad auction works, you know how to leverage it fully. I think it's important to understand that at its core, Facebook is fundamentally a machine learning company, right? The only way you can have 2.5 billion users and literally billions of ads being delivered every single day is to have it run through automation. So there's actually artificial intelligence that runs the systems. And this AI that delivers ads to people and decides which advertiser gets to show which ads to who is trying to balance between these 2 sort of buckets. The AI wants to maximize advertiser value, so the value delivered to the likes of you and me, and it also simultaneously is trying to maximize value for people, user value, perceived quality. And so with this in mind, will start to realize that if you build good content, good ads, and you give it to the right people, Facebook rewards you for it. If you half-ass your creative, half-ass your targeting, you'll actually get penalized for it in the system and you end up paying more. So the Facebook ad auction is literally an auction, by the way. And we can take a look at it in a traditional sense. So let's pretend this guy, he's scrolling through his Facebook feed and he's about to see an ad. Well, which ad does he see? Which advertiser gets to show it to this person? Let's pretend in this scenario, there's 7 advertisers. They all want to show this guy their ad. Well, it is similar to an actual auction in that everyone enters in with a bid. And the person with the highest bid, in this case, their bid is 10, gets the right to show their ad to this person. So that is how it works. It is very similar to a real auction. Of course, it happens in a millisecond. It happens billions of times a day. And rather than 7 advertisers, there's more like 100 or more. But where does the bid come from? And understanding that is important because once you understand how to increase your bid, you can win more auctions while paying less. So this is the behind the scenes auction formula that actually runs every single ad impression that is delivered on Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp. It's comprised of 3 pieces on the left here, and then you'll see on the right, they add up to your total value. This is what you go into the auction with. And the advertiser with the highest total value wins the right to show their ad. Number 1, advertiser bid. Yes, this is how much you're willing to pay to show your ad to a person. The next piece, though, is estimated action rate. This is the likelihood that someone who sees your ad is going to actually take the action that you intend. So how does this factor in? Basically, what is being said here is that if you have historically high conversion rates and action rates, Facebook recognizes that and it inflates your estimated action rate score. And so you win more auctions while paying less. It's sort of like a snowball running down a hill where it gathers snow, gets bigger and bigger, and your momentum carries forward. And then the third piece is user value. So your score in the auction is actually directly related to how much value a user gets from seeing your ad. And this is by looking at things like view-through rate, click-through rate, share rate, engagement rate. And if your targeting is correct as well, it all factors in. Facebook recognizes, oh, this advertiser is building good, high quality ads. You get actually rewarded. You get a higher total value score. You're paying less. So don't worry, this is probably the most boring slide in the deck, but it's super important. And then, now that we understand to a degree how the ad auction formula works, what should we do differently? How do we win more auctions while paying less? And how do we win the right to show our ads to very high intent individuals? 1, bid your true value. If a purchase is worth $10 for you and you're doing manual bidding, then you should set your bid to $10. 2, increase your conversion rates so that you could see this snowball effect begin. And we'll get into this part, but you need to minimize significant edits because that means you get a learning reset and the system sort of forgets your historical performance. Number 3, you got to target the right people with good creative because this inflates your user value, which gives you a reward. It lets your ad be shown to more people. So now let's jump into the real meat of this presentation. Sorry. Okay. Number 1, pro tip number 1 is this. Within Facebook's ad manager, there's actually 3 metrics that not a lot of people know about because they were only released about a year ago. For years, we had no insight as advertisers into how good our ads were, how highly they were ranked in the ad auction. Well, now when you're an ads manager, always make sure you pull up quality ranking, engagement rate ranking, and conversion rate ranking so that you can actually get some insight into how your scores are in the auction. This will tell you which of your ads is scoring higher. This will tell you if you're paying more than you should be or less than you should be for ads. You want these to all be above average if possible, and that'll give you an indication where's sort of the weakest link in this chain. Is it your user value, your quality ranking, your engagement rate ranking, etc.? Pro tip number 2. You want to feed as much data, or as sometimes we call it signal, into the delivery system to help the system predict and optimize. So basically, every action that a user conducts on your site or on your app needs to be measured by a Facebook pixel, and it needs to be passed back to your ad campaign because it helps it optimize, it helps it learn, it helps it understand who to serve your ads to next. And we see that digital native advertisers are honestly laser focused on understanding exactly how much signal volume they're capturing, and they make sure it's tied to their campaigns so that their campaigns learn and optimize and get better over time. And I want to give an analogy that a friend of mine at Facebook said years ago, and it stuck with me because it really helps to understand. You know, within Facebook, you have your campaign, and then you have your ad set, and then you have your ad. That's the hierarchy. The ad set is where the optimization takes place. This is where you set your targeting and everything, but it's the ad set that gets optimized. And what exactly is happening there? You know, basically it's like a game of Battleship, if you remember this game. And you have your board and your opponent has their board, and you're trying to guess where to sink your opponent's battleships, where their ships located. And at the start of the game, you have no idea what their board looks like. Once you sink a battleship, you have a better sense of their board, what it looks like, and you know to look nearby. So Facebook's kind of similar, the optimization engine. It's trying to guess, for example, who's going to purchase your product. Once someone purchases, it knows, okay, we got to find people who look like that purchaser. And the more purchases you get, the more actions you accumulate within your ad set, the better Facebook's system gets at understanding who to serve your ad to next. So I find that's a helpful analogy for how optimization actually occurs on Facebook. And now we know, okay, so we need lots of signal volume. We want to get lots of conversion data. How much exactly? Well, this is a rule of thumb that might be the most important tidbit in this presentation. You want to aim for, to be fully optimized, you want to aim for 50 or more conversions per week per ad set. Because after 50, that's when you exit the learning phase. That's when your ad set is optimized. And it's basically reaches this point where it's optimal in terms of guessing who to serve your ad to next. That's how you unlock the full potential of Facebook ads. That's how you leverage machine learning to the fullest. So let's look at some examples here. In the screenshot, we have about 10 ad sets, pardon me, and we're looking at 7 days worth of data. In the top row ad set, we see that this ad set had 110 purchases in the last week. Well, that's really good. That exceeds the 50 that we need, so we can say with confidence this ad set is fully optimized. However, if we look at the second ad set, we see that it's only had 2 purchases in the past 7 days. That's too low. And you can see, sure enough, it says it's still learning, right? So we can't be confident that this ad set is performing at its peak. This ad set might be much better at performing, but we haven't given it the chance to achieve 50 plus conversions per week per ad set. So that's what you want to be focused on, is being able to achieve in at least a few ad sets 50 plus conversions per week. How do you do that? Well, one thing you can do is consolidate your campaigns. Instead of having 100 campaigns, you can consolidate them, have less, so that each specific campaign and ad set gets more volume. Another thing you can do, and it's worth testing into, is if you know you can't come anywhere near 50 plus conversions per week, then consider optimizing towards a proxy like add to cart, for example, because you can get way more add to carts for less budget. So if you're heavily budget constrained, or perhaps your product or service is very expensive and you think you can't get 50 plus actions per week, then consider using a proxy. Add to cart, initiate checkout. And by the way, these principles don't just apply to e-commerce and purchases. This applies whatever your objective is, whether it's leads, whether it's purchases, subscriptions, registrations. The same thing applies. The system operates the same way. And what we see is this is absolutely reflected in the data. So Facebook recently released the findings from a meta-analysis, which is basically when an analysis of many smaller analyses, and found that advertisers with only 20% of their spend in the learning phase see 17% more conversions and 15% lower cost per action than advertisers who have 80% of their spend in the learning phase. So this is a roundabout way of saying advertisers who are optimized perform better. They pay less for actions and they get more actions. And so it really, I think it's important to validate every strategy, every tactic in data. And this data sort of undeniably demonstrates if you can get out of the learning phase, you're going to get more results while paying less. Pro tip number 3. It's not just enough to have a bunch of conversions, a bunch of data. You need to make sure you're not accidentally resetting that whole learning process. So the 50 plus conversions per week, if you accidentally trigger a learning reset, then it starts again from scratch. And a lot of advertisers, when I start working with them, might be accidentally triggering learning resets constantly. And this chart here is just illustrative, but you don't want to be in a situation where you're gaining momentum and then as soon as you're out of the learning phase, you trigger a learning reset back to zero. So this sort of cadence I see a lot of times with advertisers, that we just need to make a few changes and that way they're not triggering learning resets accidentally. So what triggers a learning reset? It's what we call a significant edit. So you can make edits to your campaigns and ad sets, but certain significant edits will cause a learning reset. And I find that there is sort of a misconception in digital marketing in general that you should be constantly optimizing your campaigns. Not true on Facebook. Yes, you should be optimizing and testing. And there's a lot that you can do on a daily basis, but you shouldn't be constantly tweaking, for example, your targeting or your creative in a campaign because it triggers a reset. It never gives you the opportunity to exit the learning phase. And what you want to do is you want to keep an eye on this column within Facebook Ads Manager. At the ad set level, this column tells you the last time there was a significant edit. Okay, but what triggers a significant edit? Well, here's my patented guide, not actually patented, by the way, to preventing significant edits. And you're not going to find this all out there on the internet because a lot of this is based off of my personal experience and Facebook hasn't publicized a lot of it. So any change to targeting, change to creative, change to an optimization event, like going from purchase to add to cart, for example, adding a new ad to your ad set, pausing your ad set for more than 7 days, changing your bid strategy, these all trigger significant edits. So just be careful that when you do these, you have to do them. Another thing you can do is consolidate all your intended edits and do them all at once. And you can actually change your budget and your bid, but you need to make sure your changes aren't more than 35% and 30% respectively. So you can change if your bid and your budget is $10 and $100 today, you can change it to $12 and $130 budget. And that's within the threshold that won't trigger a significant edit. Pro tip number 4, I kind of touched on this, but consolidation. Fewer ad sets and fewer campaigns enable those campaigns and ad sets to be better optimized. So, when I'm doing an audit of a new client and I open up their ads manager, if it looks something like this on the left here with 10 campaigns and 100 ad sets, that's an immediate red flag for me because basically it's telling me that none of these ad sets are optimized. All of them are just partially optimized. And I think it's surprising to see when you look at a digital native advertiser, how they could be spending $100,000 a day. But in a lot of cases, their campaign structure looks like this on the right here, where they're forcing a lot of budget through very few ad sets, ultimately resulting in those ad sets being extremely well optimized. Pro tip number 5, you want to take advantage. Another way that artificial intelligence comes into play is with what we call lookalike targeting. So lookalikes are the best way to have, when it comes to targeting, scale and also hyper relevance. And and when I say having a robust lookalike targeting strategy, what I mean is you should have a campaign that sometimes looks like this, where under the campaign, you might have 4 separate ad sets and each of them has a specific type of lookalike. You might be asking, what exactly is a lookalike? So let me give you an example. What does it look like? Why is it so powerful? Basically, a lookalike is when Facebook uses machine learning to find people that look like your seed audience, but it's not actually physically looking like them. It's across thousands of characteristics and behavior as well. But if you give Facebook 100 people who purchased your product, the best thing you could do is say, find me people who look like my purchasers and let's target them. It's an extremely effective tactic. So let's say, hypothetically, you give Facebook your seed audience. Let's say it's me. You give Facebook me, you go, find me some lookalikes. So Facebook will go and find you a bunch of people that look like me, and they'll be your next best bet for driving actions. It's people who look like, resemble, not actually physically, it's a joke, but people who resemble behaviorally and psychographically your seed audience. Pro tip number 6, it's not just about signal volume, or in other words, how much volume you get, but it's also about signal health, as we call it. And signal health is really a matter of having your Facebook pixel on your website and making sure that it is that it's implemented perfectly. So the Facebook pixel is actually a little piece of code that you put on every page of your website. And when people visit your site, it sends information back to your Facebook campaign. And that lets you measure your off the Facebook performance. So it lets you measure when someone sees an ad, what do they do afterwards? It lets you measure your return on investment and your revenue that stems from your ads. It lets you build lookalikes. So if you have the Facebook pixel, you could say, find me people that look like my site visitors or my add to carters or my leads or my purchasers. And it lets you optimize. So if you have the Facebook pixel set up and your objective is purchases, you can optimize towards purchase. You don't have to just be stuck with clicks. All right. So how do you have it? How do you have a Facebook pixel implemented perfectly? These are my personal principles for making sure your Facebook pixel is implemented correctly. So when I'm looking at a new client, I'll see, number 1, did you use standard events? You don't want to be overusing custom conversions. You want to use Facebook's standard events, because then Facebook, when it's optimizing, can take advantage of the millions of competitor websites that also have the Facebook pixel installed. So if you say you want to purchase, Facebook understands, oh, we know what a purchase is because all these other advertisers have the standard event set up, and it can optimize towards it better. Universal placement. That's basically making sure every page, every action is covered by the pixel. You don't want to have any holes or gaps. Representative fires. When someone adds to cart, does the add to cart event fire? You want it to be representative. And the last one, this is an advanced tactic, but is definitely worth it, is parameter passback. So the Facebook pixel can fire someone purchased, or it can pass back additional parameters. Someone purchased, they used an iPhone, they purchased this item and this item, the revenue was $150. And then when you get that information, you can use it to further segment, to build even more refined lookalikes, et cetera. Okay, last pro tip is creative. We can't not talk about creative because, as I said earlier, creative is definitely king. And I want you guys to think about, whenever you're building ads, think about vertical format. Why? Because if you look at this chart, Facebook's Snapchat clones, as they're called, basically Instagram stories, WhatsApp status, and Facebook stories, they all hit 500 million daily active users in early 2019. So they're well past this point now. But that's how people are consuming content. So think vertical first, and then maybe horizontal or square second. Now, when we're building ads for creative, let's set the stage a bit. The average Facebook user is scrolling through 300 feet of content in feed every single day. That's the height of the Statue of Liberty, for context. And the average North American user is opening Facebook 14 times a day and Instagram 11 times a day. It is extremely difficult to catch someone's attention in a meaningful way in this type of environment because it's so transient, it's so fleeting. So creative best practices really stem from the idea that if you have a moment's attention of someone, how do you leverage it to achieve actual business outcomes? Number one, capture attention quickly. Find a way to make your ad thumb-stopping, whether it's through movement or action or vibrant colors or stylistically. Number two, design for sound off. In feed, 80% or more of people are going to watch your video sound off. So you need to make sure your message does not depend on audio. We like to say, build for sound off, delight with sound on. So you should still have music and audio and dialogue. Just make sure that your ad itself is built for sound off primarily. Number three, be creative with framing your visual story. If you have a full vertical landscape image like this one, then leverage it. Find a way to use it, integrate it into your ads. Showcase your product or service. I'll give you some examples for this. Play with formats. We'll look at some examples as well. Leverage moving images. So if you don't have the, let's say, the budget or the desire to build video ads, but you have very solid static, think about ways you can add some movement to static to make it what we call cinematograph, because we've seen time and time again in research that outperforms simply putting static images as ads. And then test different variations of the same concept if you find that it works. Let's look at some examples. This eBay example campaign I worked on with them, you see branding comes up right away, super early. You see this works in a sound off environment. We're obviously not hearing it now. The way that they're using the vertical canvas and the way that it is extremely fast in pace is really well done here. So this would never air on TV. It's just too fast. But on mobile, this is how people consume content. And so it's built well with that in mind. This next one is from a jeans company, and you'll see the way they natively integrated Instagram's font here, the way they're using the vertical aspect ratio, and the way it works perfectly in a sound off environment. Really good ad. Now, this last one is a car company, Volvo, but I just want to show you how they're using framing here. So you could see that they're cutting back and forth between a wide shot and a long shot. They've reformatted an existing ad to have it be a really strong Instagram stories ad. Next examples are from Allbirds. Shoe company, these guys crush it on Facebook, and you'll see that they don't spend a lot. I mean, these aren't high production value ads, but they're simple, concise. The branding is up front. It's product centric, and they add a little bit of movement to catch your attention to make it thumb stopping. Just a little bit of movement, a little bit of animation, highly effective. Okay. So there's actually been a lot of research head to head, still photo versus cinematograph. Cinematograph outperforms time and time again. So this is a really good approach. I always have cinematograph ads running in addition to my videos and my static. And there's a lot of tools for doing this, but a really simple one, and I think it's like $1 a month or $2 maybe, is Pixaloop. It's a good app, but there's plenty out there. Okay. So in conclusion, over this session, what did we learn? Number one, use ad relevance diagnostics to make sure you're measuring and you're always aware of your standing in the auction. So you can see how you're improving it or which ads work better in the auction, and compare yourself versus competition. Number two, feed more data or signal into the delivery system to help the system predict and optimize. Aim for at least 50 conversions per ad set per week in order to be fully optimized. Number 3, minimize learning resets. So do your best to avoid significant edits. Now, you can't eliminate them fully, but what you can do is consolidate your intended edits and do them all at once. And you can edit campaigns within the confines of the constraints we covered. Number 4, simplify the campaign structure for fewer but more optimized ad sets. Number 5, build a robust lookalike targeting strategy. Number 6, ensure you have the Facebook pixel on your site, on every page of your site, and make sure it's implemented perfectly. And 7, maybe most important, creative is king, and make sure you're building mobile optimized ads. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but I do want to tell you guys a little bit about my course, my full Facebook ads course. The basic premise behind building it was if I had amnesia, forgot everything I know about Facebook ads, and then I had to learn Facebook ads again from scratch, how would I do it without spending years, millions of ad dollars, and doing countless errors? How would I set up for myself to relearn it? So I built this course, 75 video lessons, tutorials, and strategies covering everything from building ads to how to scale once you have an optimal campaign structure, what do the best advertisers do, e-commerce strategy, lead generation strategy, retargeting strategy, dynamic ads. There's a lot. And all the lessons basically fall into either being strategy, so straight up strategic approach to buying against an objective. Number 2, I do have step-by-step tutorials walking you through exactly how to execute my strategies. And number 3, conceptual lessons. So this is understanding things like how the ad auction works, because foundationally, when you build the foundation up, you know how to pivot, how to serve any business objective you have coming. So there is a discount available for people on this course. It's normally about $300, but the link provided in this stream, you can get access to the course for $196. It's lifetime access. It's at your own pace. You can come back to and do it as many times as you like. This is my site, but I think it's linked to in the chat as well. All right, I know I definitely want to answer some questions. So I think I'm going to throw back to Cam.
All right. I'm going to stop this screen sharing if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Perfect. All right. So everyone, that was great. I'm still reeling here from all that info. So there were a few good questions in here, and I want to just dive through these. So it's either Andrea or Andrea has a question about how do you use Facebook ads to promote your course? It's a little bit of a case study. Like what's your own strategy for getting people onto your course with Facebook ads?
Yeah, great question. So let's see, over the past year, I've personally spent about $200,000 on Facebook and Instagram ads for my course, and my ROAS is about 3 or 4x. So what I'm doing works at scale. And it is actually fundamentally the concepts I cover in my course, but some of the more important tactics that I approach is the way I'm doing retargeting. So I've set up in the past a prospecting campaign, which leads people to a free webinar or a free mini course. And then from there, you can target them through email. You can also retarget them on Facebook, Instagram, etc. And that's super important because your retargeting campaign, when it comes to information products like a course, is going to be your highest ROI driver. So make sure you have a lot of messages, several ways you're handling objections. Make sure that is all integrated into your retargeting campaign so that if someone visits your site or adds to cart but doesn't purchase or accesses your mini course or accesses a webinar, make sure you can capture that intent through having a rigorous retargeting structure set up afterwards. So that's it's a big topic. That's the conclusion, I would say.
Marion in the chat says, "I love your retargeting. It really gets our attention." And Khal, this is just my own thing because I'm into credit card points and stuff, but I hope you're putting all that spend on a rewards card that gets 3 or 4x on online ads. Better
Oh
be.
man. Oh, me too. Yeah, yeah. Amex Gold, 4x points. It's
Ah,
pretty great. I think I have like 1 million points.
that's what it's all about. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a question from Jordan. So Jordan says, question for Khalid. A couple of years ago, I used to be able to target very specific keywords regarding the type of music that I teach on Teachable. Djembe drum, darbuka, hang drum, tabla. Now these keyword search terms aren't even an option. So
Mhm.
what happened to this kind of thing, and how can I target properly without those keywords?
Yeah, good question. So I was still at Facebook when they deprecated or sort of phased out a bunch of specific interests. And the reason they did this is because some of the niche interests were somehow being exploited or abused. But regardless, those aren't coming back. And now for something to enter an interest, it needs to have a certain threshold size level. So two things I'd suggest doing. Number one, there's a great tool called Interest Explorer. If you look it up, I don't run it, but it is a colleague who runs it. And it's a tool where you enter a keyword and it produces all of the similar keywords to that are still targetable through Facebook as interests. And you can sort of layer them on top of each other and do some cool stuff there. So that's a tool that's worth checking out. The second thing I would say is I've always found that lookalike targeting on the whole, don't get me wrong, there is a time and place for interest targeting. And for a lot of people, it is the most effective way to target. But I've always leaned more heavily on lookalike targeting because you get scale and relevance. So maybe think about if there's a way for you to shift your strategy a little bit more towards lookalikes. Are people visiting your page? Do you have emails you can use? Do you have Facebook or Instagram followers that you can build lookalikes off of? These are all potential sources for building a lookalike off of. And you might find that that generates better results than straight up interest targeting.
So I'm seeing another question in here
Mhm.
from Paul.
Mhm.
Um, so Paul says, I have a couple questions here that are about the course.
Cool.
So Sarah, I'll give them to you and you can go through them in order. So Sergio says, is a course for beginners or advanced folks?
Mhm.
Um, Chloe says, does your course include a step-by-step on setting up a seed audience and integrating the pixel? And finally, Paul says, I run multiple websites and I'm having challenges trying to set up ad managers and pixels to handle those multiple websites. Does the course cover this kind of thing?
Okay. Great questions, guys. Uh, Let me see if I can remember all this. So the first one was, is it for beginners or experts? So the content sort of advances from beginner all the way to expert, but I found that the people who benefit most from it have at least set up a campaign in the past. Because while it does begin quite basic and the strategies are covered in step-by-step tutorials, I'm not covering the simple stuff like how to create an ad account, how to set up your billing. Like these are very, very early stuff. I'd say it's best suited for people who have at least tried to set up a campaign in the past. And even people who you can actually go to Trustpilot and see some reviews from a bunch of people who've taken the course. But I really find that beginners, intermediates, and advanced all have something valuable they can take away from it. And yeah, and the other thing is, there's a refund policy specifically in place for anyone who signs up and finds it's not well suited for them. So you have 30 days basically to realize, oh, is this not for my level? But for the most part, the course content spans, it progresses from beginner to intermediate to some quite advanced strategies. The second question was about, do I show how to set up? Can you remind me, Cameron, what was the second question?
Yeah, it was about setting up like a seed audience and adding the pixel into your website.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So I do show you how to set up, how to build a seed audience, how to build lookalikes, how to build custom audiences. That is covered in the tutorial. How to set up a Facebook pixel on your site is very light in my course, actually, because setting up the Facebook pixel is something you do external to Facebook, right? So you would do it on a WordPress or on a Shopify or WooCommerce, wherever you're being hosted. And so there's actually a thousand ways to do it. It depends on your site. But the best thing to do, some sites like Shopify have an incredibly easy integration. It's very easy to do. The best thing is to look up Shopify pixel instructions on Google or wherever you're hosting your site, because it will be specific to that site. And sorry, what was the third question, Cameron?
Question was asking about if the course will help someone who's kind of running multiple websites. They're kind of confused about the biz manager or ad manager. They've got a couple different things going on. Does the course help with that kind of thing, like those logistics?
Yeah, good question. So there's a whole section in the course that's about how to set up additional business managers, additional ad accounts. And in my tutorials, I do walk you through like the navigation. So here's how to navigate Ads Manager, the different sections, the different pages, here's how to switch between ad accounts and the like. And, myself, I have like several business managers, a bunch of ad accounts, as did many of the clients I've worked with. So I'm pretty used to that sort of complexity, and I try to integrate it in the teaching. Good question.
And we have another interesting question here from Marion. And Marion says, is it better to set a daily budget, one for the whole campaign, or bid?
Yeah. So first of all, bid and budget are a bit different. So you could have a lifetime budget or a daily budget. It's true, those are mutually exclusive, but bidding is sort of a separate tactic. So you can apply bidding to either of those options. Is it better to do a daily budget or a lifetime budget is tricky because it depends on the specific context. But if you use a lifetime budget, then Facebook will use what's called pacing. And pacing will look at your whole budget, it'll look at your scheduled campaign period, and it will fluctuate spend accordingly based on how it thinks it can get you more outcomes while paying less. So conceptually, it is better, but a lot of advertisers like to use daily budget because it gives them better control over increasing your budget up or down. Now, bidding is a extremely powerful option. However, it is also an advanced tactic. So I wouldn't jump into manual bidding right away, but you can work up to it eventually. And bidding enables you to tell the system, for example, the most I'm willing to pay for a purchase is $10. Set that as my bid. And once it's learned and it's optimized, Facebook will only be delivering my ad to people who it expects will give me a purchase for less than $10. And in this way, you can keep your costs in check while the volume of results is the thing that changes every day. Good question.
I see a question here from Phil, and I guess this comes back to like a daily spending question. Phil says, what would a minimum amount be to spend on ads in a day just to start getting an ad to your target audience? Do you have any thresholds for that?
Yeah, another good question. So the approach I take here, first of all, I think you should never spend outside of a level you're comfortable with, right? Some of the marketing gurus out there will tell you you need to be spending $10,000, and it feels like a number was pulled out of nowhere. It is an auction-based platform, meaning millions of advertisers are in fact spending $5, $10, $15, $20 a day, and it's working for them. However, the approach I like to take here is, how much would you have to spend to be fully optimal? Because that'll give you a sense of what your potential return on investment is. And so how much do you have to spend to be fully optimal? I work it back from the formula of 50 plus conversions per week. So let's say your item is priced at $10, $10 item. Then I would do 10 times 50. and $500. And I would say to be fully optimal, I should be spending around $500 per week in a campaign. But, you know, this is more of, I would say it's guidance rather than a silver bullet solution. It's also important to work up to your budget. So you don't want to spend all your money at once. You want to sort of pace it out and understand, capture some early signal, look at your cost per click, your cost per add to cart, your cost per checkout, initiate, so that you can understand, are you at least trending towards a profitable direction, or is it better to sort of pause and reassess? Is my website fully optimized? How can I optimize it? Or is my creative fully optimized? Is my targeting on point? So you need to look at early signals as you start running your campaign to understand if you should keep spending or pull back.
So this is a question about the course, which I think is pretty important, and we're coming up on the hour. So I think actually we're gonna make this the last question. So while you answer this, I'd love if everyone could just type into the chat and say thank you to Khalid for joining us today, sharing so much knowledge. Like this was a course worth paying for on its own, honestly. But if you could just say thanks to Khalid for joining us, that I always love. It's great to see that appreciation. So in the meantime, we have a question here from Paul who says, "Is the course material kept current? One of the problems I find is that Facebook advertising tutorials reference old screen layouts, menus, other things that have changed, make it really difficult to actually follow the nuts and bolts. So what's your policy on keeping this up to date?"
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So this was actually sort of the impetus behind me deciding to build this course. Was seeing what was out there was dated, and in some cases was based off of just incorrect information. So most of the content in the course was produced over the past few months. It is extremely up to date at this point. And so that's my policy really, is I'm not going to keep pushing this course and marketing it and selling it when I think it's no longer relevant. On top of that, I have been updating it. So you'll see in the last section of my course, there's like new lessons that I had updated pretty recently to try to keep it as up to date as possible. I think that's extremely important, especially in light of how rapidly Facebook ads change. Yeah, and guys, thank you so much, everyone who stuck around. I hope you found it valuable. This was very fun for me. And yeah, thanks for everyone's time.
Yep, I'm seeing all the thank yous in the chat. Everyone's saying thank you, Khalid. Thank you so much for teaching us all this stuff. So
No.
any last words, or where can folks kind of find you online or keep in touch?
Yeah, feel free to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, it's the Khalid H. I am working on actually a new company, which is a Facebook creative testing service. So we'll test your ads rapidly before you launch your campaign. So if you follow me on social media, you'll hear updates about this company as it comes out. I'm pretty excited about that. And yeah, seriously, thank you everybody for being engaged, for the really good questions, and for sticking it out through a lot of content, I think.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Hope to see you all on the other side in the course.
And
Take
thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Thanks so much, Cameron. That was
Bye.
awesome.